Could you tell your name and what country you're from?
Derek O'Sullivan. I'm from the United Kingdom.
My name is Joop van Kool.
My name is Joey Ayoub and I am from Lebanon. I have a list of websites that I regularly check, so like trusted blogs or trusted news sources. And besides that, I have a number of Twitter users and Facebook users and pages that I follow regularly for updates.
To follow politics, most of the internet.
Websites, you have Global Voices Online, you have Muftah, you have Middle East Eye, you have Jadaliyya.
RT, Counterpunch. Can't really think of any others. I use Business Insider as well. Try to get both sides.
Politics in the journal, the kranten, the journals, TV, television, and radio.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I shun the mainstream media, but as a general, just as a general rule, I have more of a trust. I trust more the alternative media that I have come to trust, not randomly, obviously. There is a theoretical basis for the freedom of press. It's defended by law. It's in our constitution. So it's there in the sense that we can be free, theoretically speaking.
It's okay, but probably getting worse.
Why do you think so?
Well, I spent a lot of time in the United States, and I've seen what their journalism is. Their journalism is all based on commercialism, and there are certain things that they can't say, and a lot of the news is pretty uniform. And news in the UK is news in the UK is becoming similar.
Lebanon is always said to have the most liberal press in the Arab world, and to a certain extent that's accurate. We don't technically have censorship, even though we do have incidences of censorship, so like an individual minister trying to censor something.
Better, I think, in Sweden and Denmark. Worse in the African countries and in Russia.
Where press freedom is worse than the UK, probably somewhere like North Korea is my guess. I've never been to North Korea, but based upon what I understand about the culture, that'd be worse. Better than the UK? Believe it or not, I can't say a country, but in terms of quality of information, I found that Al Jazeera has a wider variety of information.
Well, in a country that's better, you would have any nation like France, let's say, that has a secular state, a secular democracy. Just because it would be much harder for a French audience to believe something that is inherently sectarian, just because of the political culture that is in France. Something that's worse than Lebanon, I mean, most of the Arab nations, I mean, all of the Arab nations, if I'm not mistaken, they all have some kind of filter, some kind of official censorship bureau, some much more stricter than others, obviously, like you would say Saudi Arabia is stricter than Jordan.
I'm sure that is, yes.
Well, it impacts it very significantly. If there's something that they don't want to show, they don't show it. So if we're talking about one media station, and the news of the day is something to do with a member of that party, that's negative, say. They just either won't show it, or they would show some kind of alternative narrative that is factually incorrect.
Well, in the US, it's very simple. It's the advertisers run the game. So if I'll give you an example. I used to live in Florida, and there was a news division in, I think it was Orlando, and they wanted to do a story on the dangers of rides at Disney World. And because the station, I believe, was owned by a Disney affiliate, they got called up to the office and said, you're going to kill that story, you're not going to do it. And the guy was like, freedom of the press, and they were like, no, we own it. We own it, so you're not going to do the story.
So, but there's also the paradox because Lebanon's mainstream media is either owned by political parties, most of them at least, the vast majority of them actually, either directly owned by a political party or they are aligned ideologically with a political party or coalition.
In England, with the BBC, it's state-owned. I mean, they like to point to, like Russia and RT, and they like to say, that's Putin's network. Well, by the same token, the BBC would be, Cameron's network or the Queen's network or something.
I would say that the role is quite similar in both, especially if you live in a democracy, let's say. Then you're obviously supposed by if the system is working, you're supposed to have access to genuine information, to real information, not something that is filtered through some kind of political lens. If you live in a dictatorship, then the media has even a more important role to play. They are the ones that are supposed to be challenging the status quo to begin with.
I would tend to think the best information possible. You have to inform citizens of what's going on. And when you give them good information, then they can make good decisions. They can say, well, I want this because ABC 1, 2, 3, or I don't want it because of these reasons.
It's hard to say.
When we talk about Lebanon, I would say that the journalists, for example, just as an example today, we don't live in a dictatorship, but we also don't live in a democracy. Lebanon has some kind of weird in-between situation. Today there was a protest happening at the Ministry of Environment, and there were several activists that were stuck inside. And the activists were telling journalists, the NBC one specifically, please stay with us because we don't know what they might do to us, the police, what they might do to us if you leave. So that in that case, for example, you have a very specific and very urgent role that journalists can play.
And to answer another part of your question, context is very, very, very important. If you're doing a story on North Korea, if you're doing a story on Saudi Arabia, we need the context. We need history. We need why this person did this, why this person didn't do that. That way, people can make informed decisions.
The ideal relationship is that journalists should be a constant pain in the ass. They should really, if they really want to do their job, then they have to not accept an answer by a politician just because that politician has said so. So there was this joke that the journalist, I forgot his name, said he called the New York Times officials say, because he would see an article by the New York Times and in the New York Times, and he would see that there are so many articles that are basically just quotations by officials without an actual investigation. Yeah, obviously, and this is why they have a very big responsibility, because if they find out that there's some kind of scandal going on and they decide not to report on it, then this could be the only thing that makes a scandal go away. And we don't know what kind of impact and this would affect society. So yeah, definitely it does. They do have a huge power, which they obviously need to know how to use.
Do I agree with that statement?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Because everybody has a boss, and somebody's going to come from downstairs and say, "No, you're not going to say that," or "That's going to, we're going to leave that out. It's going to end up on the cutting room floor."
No, not at all. I mean, they're powerful just because they're powerful, not because they should be, and not because they're doing a good job. They're powerful because if they know that there's a scandal and they report on it, then that's obviously a big responsibility. But they can also choose to report on it in a very bad way. So it's not that they have the responsibility and they just decide whether to switch on and off button. They have also a responsibility on how to write it.
An accurate picture. It gives a Western bias to information. That's what I've you know, that's what I've come to understand anyway. I'll give you one example. Like I think there was that plane crash and they didn't know whether the Russians had shut down the plane or it had been shut down in Ukraine. But they tended to veer towards saying that the Russians had shut it down, and we still haven't seen their evidence. We haven't seen um, documents or real journalism, basically.
No, I think quality of news would get better because despite obstacles and despite some kind of the effects of conditioning basically that we have in most societies, I do think that most people these days know more than a few years ago, for example. And that's because of the work of the investigative journalists, obviously, but it's also because of the very nature of the medium in which they write, so the internet, basically. And the internet has a way of, if you're trying to hide something, it will come up. There's even a law for it, I forgot its name. So no, I do think it's going to get better. Not because I'm, overly optimistic or any of that, but just because I do see things being more diversified in terms of content and in terms of priorities.
It will become more splintered and diversified because we have the internet now. For those regions of the internet that have been consolidated and commodified, they will do what you're seeing now, and they will do what they need to get the eyes on the media. They will be the sprinkles of truth.
I hope it is better. I think it's worse.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.